Our next panel, if you all would come forward, this is the Internet the future of journalism or the end of days? And we're kind of trying to, I guess, follow a historic model running from print to the Internet. Lee Banville is going to lead this panel. And Lee is an assistant professor of journalism here at the University of Montana. And he joined the faculty just this year, in August 2009, after 14 years with the NewsHour and Jim Lehrer. So he brings a very broad and both national perspective and local perspective to the discussion. Lee? So please join me in welcoming Lee Banville.
Thank you. Well, the Internet's come up a lot in this presentation, or throughout the day. I have to apologize. Earlier in the day, I was educating 150 freshmen about the future of the media. That is frightening. This should be easy. But what we wanted to do structurally was something a little different because in true new media, multimedia style, we wanted this to be more user-generated as well as a conversation among the guys I'll introduce you to in a second. The other thing I need to warn you is that new media is not just sort of in the ether, it's actually here. So be aware that in this corner over here, all of what we're talking about and all that's being said is already being sent out into the world via Twitter. So this idea that new media is all around us and that it's actually kind of ubiquitous is something that we need to be aware of. But I think what's interesting about this panel and what I'm really excited about is there's been a lot of talk about traditional media and how it needs to evolve. What are the sort of models of the future business? Now that some kind of large meteor has struck in the Yucatan, how did the dinosaurs evolve? There's also the furry mammals that grew up right after the meteor hit and have really been built in more of this new media sphere, this multimedia production. And we have two of the best examples actually in local news out there, and they're both local, as in local to Missoula and to Montana. And I wanted them to kind of talk a little bit about the thinking that went into the start of their organizations and how they saw their sort of multimedia production and multimedia actual business models sort of playing into the organization. But first, let me introduce you to them. Because first we have Jonathan Weber, who is who before, in the good old days, was the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Industry Standard, which was, as was said, I mean, I've been doing new media since like 1995, so the Industry Standard was the Bible of the dot-com industry during the 90s. It was the place you went to find out what the really smart people were already doing and making money at so that you could try and then copy it and make money at it. And it kind of followed the arc of the first meteor. The meteoric rise and then the sort of, well, can I say crash and burn? Is that too harsh? Luckily for us, right after the crashing and burning of the dot-com industry and unfortunately the Industry Standard with it, he returned to Montana because his first job was actually at the Chico Hot Springs, right? Waiting tables, which I think there are probably even better stories there than maybe in what we're going to be talking about. But he came back to Montana as a visiting professor at the University of Montana and stayed because he saw a need. And I'm curious, what was it that you saw here that you thought your kind of organization could best address? And sort of how did it get started and how did it evolve?
Thanks, Lee. I appreciate it, and thanks to the Wheeler Center for having this conference. The origin of New West, as Lee recounted, I came here after the crash and burn of the Industry Standard, and in coming to Missoula, I had always been interested in Montana. I had lived here and been engaged in some of the some of the issues here. But what struck me after relatively short time after moving here was that I was personally very interested in a lot of the issues associated with growth and change in the region, not just in Missoula, but more broadly in Montana and more broadly in the Rocky Mountain West. And it seemed to me a part of the country that was undergoing a lot of change, and there was just a lot of interesting stuff happening. And there wasn't a lot of journalism that was sort of about that per se. There was certainly the local newspapers and media organizations, many of which are represented here, and obviously in all the states. In Colorado, there are big newspapers, and so it's not that there wasn't media, but there's very little real regional media. The Big Sky Journal, which David McCumber was actually the founding editor, I believe, was one of the few successful regional publications of any type. Regional publishing is a difficult matter, but I thought that it was a regional story, and it struck me as a journalist as kind of a big story, that there's a big story about growth and change happening in this region, and there is not a lot of media about that story per se. So I thought journalistically there was an interesting opportunity there, and at the same time, I had been involved in both covering as a reporter and then involved in as editor of the Industry Standard, and even previously at the LA Times, where I had launched a new technology section. And I had been involved in the evolution of the media world for a long time, and it seemed to me that a lot of things that were predicted that people had been expecting, really going back to the 70s, when people first kind of saw the rise of computers and online communications, and how was that going to affect the information delivery business. And this was not a new conversation. This has been going on for decades. But it seemed to me that the expectation that there was going to be a big shift, that the online and new information delivery techniques had kind of hit a tipping point where they were really going to start to fundamentally change the dynamics of the media business. And I thought that point had arrived. So kind of taking those two things, a big story that I found interesting and important, and big changes in the media business, and I thought if you could bring those two things together, that might create a business opportunity. And so then I went out and raised money, and I could talk about that too.
Well, I was going to ask about that, because obviously, if you're going to start some kind of new media operation, there has to be an audience that's not being served by the existing media. What was that audience, and how did you think New West could serve it, and what sort of media choices did you make, sort of publishing platforms and things like that, that you thought would best address that audience?
Well, I think that it wasn't so much that there was an audience not served by media, but that there was a broad audience not being served with a tight focus on this particular story, on this story of growth and change on a regional level. Mm. So there was a premise that there was an audience for that was interested in that particular story, and we identified that as being basically a highly educated audience as the most critical characteristic, engaged in community affairs that tends to correlate to higher income, those kinds of things. So we kind of defined the demographics in that way. Honestly, we didn't do tons of market research, and one of my experiences in starting publications is that if you ask people in advance if they want this new publication, they usually say no, because they've already got too much to read and so forth. But, like we did market research when we launched the Industry Standard, the market research was scary. It was like, why would we want another internet magazine? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. A weekly? Are you crazy? It was extremely negative. If we had followed that market research, the magazine never would have been launched. But when you show people something, then it's very different. So you ask them an abstract question like, do you want a magazine about the internet business? They say no. And then you show them the Industry Standard, and they say, oh, well, I didn't know that you meant that. That magazine is actually very interesting. So yes, I like that. So that was kind of the way that we thought about the launch. The issues about, platform and things like that, was really a pragmatic issue. We we went out and found an inexpensive and high-performance publishing platform, and I wouldn't underestimate the impact of the technology and the platforms on a lot of what we're talking about here. Because when we built the website for the industry standard, we spent $1.5 million maybe. And then the process of publishing to it and updating it and all that stuff was very cumbersome, took a lot of people. I mean, it was just, we used Quark for the magazine publishing. That didn't interface to the web publishing system in any kind of automated way, so we did all this stuff by hand. And, it was just crazy. And when we built the New West website, what I used to say is that we got basically 90% of the functionality that we had on the standard website for 1/100th of the cost. And that was a function of how quickly the technology has evolved.
And I guess one more thing before we move on to Kellen. I'm curious about the sort of business model of New West, too, because it does sort of strike me that it's one of the more innovative functions of it, that it's not built around strict advertising, but it's a mix of things. I'm wondering if you could talk about what that model is and how it's sort of evolved thus far.
Well, certainly advertising is a core part of it, and I am and always have been a believer in online advertising. I think the potential of online advertising has been underestimated in a lot of the media business. It's difficult. It doesn't function in the way that people thought. There's a lot of things about it that are not what people thought would be the case. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a very important medium for advertising. It's going to command very good prices in certain kinds of applications. We get very good prices for the ads. So I do think that online advertising should not be underestimated as a supporter of journalism. Another big component of our business model, which I've always also been a believer in, is conferences and live events. And we have actually a conference coming up in about 10 days called Real Estate and Development in the Northern Rockies, which we're doing for the 4th time. I urge you all to come, by the way. It's October 12th and 13th. The conferences are very much about the things that New West is about editorially, so we view it as a very much an extension of the editorial mission. We program the conferences very carefully. They're high production values, very good speakers, kind of creating a conference I sometimes think of as a little bit like editing a magazine. You're trying to kind of put different pieces together and make it all fit into a nice package, and so that's an important part of our business. We currently do 3 major conferences, and we charge several $100s for the tickets, and we also have sponsors, and we make money on that. So that's been important. And then we have a few smaller revenue streams. We have a small indoor advertising business that was sort of a opportunistic thing, and we have a little bit of syndication revenue, which we actually think has more potential. And so there's, you kind of piece it together with a number of different components. Mm-hmm.
Well, another model of what can be done sort of in this chaotic, I guess is a good way to describe the sort of media culture at the moment. I I just got to Montana and I find out that there's already a media crisis, which was upsetting because I thought I'd left that. But one of the more interesting efforts is the Flathead Beacon. And for those of you, I think there's several print editions of it I've seen floating around at the conference. I recommend you pick one up. But the editor-in-chief of it is Kellen Brown, who is a Grizz, go Grizz, but spent several years working in the region. Was hired by AP to cover the North Dakota legislature, worked at the Bozeman Daily Chronicle for several years as an investigative reporter and city editor, before coming back to help found in 2007 the Flathead Beacon. And I'm curious, Kellen, sort of what brought you back? What was the idea there that intrigued you? And then sort of who would start a newspaper right now? And why would you do that? And what was the thinking behind it?
Well, first off, it wasn't with my money, to be clear. But first, I'm real flattered to be up here. I don't see Sherry Devlin, but she taught me public affairs reporting. Dennis Swibel got me a job. Jonathan Weber got me a job. I worked with Jeff Welch, and so it's a lot of good journalists in this room, and I appreciate the time up here. But the story of the Flathead Beacon took me by surprise. It was 3 years ago when I was city editor of the Bozeman Chronicle, and Jonathan Weber contacted me. I didn't have him in class, but he was the Polna professor when I worked at the Kaiman. He was talking about this project that Maury Povich and Connie Chung wanted to start in the Flathead Valley. It was a very surreal cup of coffee, and then he asked me if I'd be interested in heading up the editorial side, and I told him I'd think about it. It didn't take me long to think about it and drive over to Missoula a couple times and to bug him and say, I want to do this, I'm ready to do this. Who gets the opportunity to start a newspaper in their lifetime, or help start one? There was a lot of players, including Liz Markey, who's on our advisory board. There's a lot of people that helped launch the Beacon. I guess I saw it as a way to kind of shape a voice and a product from the very beginning, and the perception of a product from the very beginning. I was able to hire, we don't pay large wages like most newspapers, but I was really able to put together the team that I wanted to. Some of you know Dan Testa. He's my senior writer and right-hand man, and Myers Reese out of Livingston, and then Lito Vizzuti, all are UM grads. So we started, I have a newsroom of 5 people, 3 writers, 1 photographer, 1 designer. And the idea from the beginning was to really strive to have a daily online product and a weekly print product, and to see if that works, to see if that sticks, to see if it's financially, if you're financially capable to do that. So we started, and there were some serious growing pains. We don't really have a webmaster or anything like that. Everything we do, we had to learn on the run and learn fast. And so all of my staff is expected to be basically their own webmasters, content managers. Same with Jonathan at New West. But it was all of us. It was all of us there, and learning on the run. And so we've evolved, and I think we've grown up a little bit over 2 years, into this product, into this real product that gets. We get about 80,000 views a month online, which isn't, don't compare that to the Tribune or the Missoulian, but for us, for a newsroom of 5 is big for us, and so we saw growth there very, very quickly. And part of the strategy was to get people online and to make it visually stimulating for them to come back. If you've ever been to the Flathead Beacon website or seen the newspaper, our newspaper's in full color, lots of photos, that sort of thing. And we're not trying to dumb down the product, but we really think it's important to always be pumping photos and changing the look of flatheadbeacon.com every hour, even every 2 hours, that sort of thing. So those same people in the Flathead that will come not once, but twice, but 3 times all day. And the onus is on us and our staff to do that. I mean, we're all updating. I have to trust them to do updates while I'm here, and that sort of thing. So that's what we've tried. That's what I strove to make in the Flathead, and we've had some success and some failures. But I've been able to keep a small team that I trust together, save for 1 person, over the last 2.5 years, and it's been kind of a wild ride. And Maury Povich, a lot of you guys know him from the Maury Show, but probably fewer know Shirley Povich, his father, who was just an amazing journalist for the Washington Post, worked till well into his 80s. And Maury's very committed to the Beacon. The economy definitely has it's hurt us. I mean, the Flathead, you guys I'm sure have read about the Flathead in northwest Montana. It's a sad scene up there. And so we think we're over the hump, though. The community really seems like it's getting back on its feet. So we launched at what some could call an inopportune time, but I also view it as it's been a very, very newsworthy time to live in the Flathead in northwest Montana and watch the different industries change and evolve and that sort of thing. So to get back to your first, your original question, why did I think that I start a paper? Because I guess, the easy answer is who's 27 is offered the opportunity to start a newspaper. So that's why I did it. That's kind of what we've become, and we've grown fast, and we're optimistic about the future.
I mean, I'm curious about, you mentioned that you've had successes and you've had setbacks, which any good new news organization has had some bumps along the way. Are there any that sort of stick out that you think were real learning moments, either in how you deliver news online versus print, and any successes that actually show that?
Yeah, I think one misconception is holding stories for the print edition. I tried it at the beginning. I was like, okay, I have these great stories, and I'm going to wait until our weekly print edition comes out to unload them. And it's a bad idea. I load 60 to 70% of all my stories that are going to go in my print product online before we print. So this paper, some people have already seen 70% of it, and our circulation hasn't gone down at all. And it's different for us, obviously, because we're free, but we still put out 13,000 print papers a week, and we consume, on average, 12,000. We only get back about 1,000 a week. So I definitely have gone away from that. If we have a story, even if it's not breaking news, often I will put it online. I do, our enterprise piece, we have a series on homelessness right now. I wait till Wednesday. Wednesday's when we come out, and I load our main stories Wednesday morning, but often Wednesday morning at like 1 a.m. I time release it, and so then it actually is online before print, but it hasn't hurt the number of people picking up the product, and our print's still our moneymaker. I mean, no, it's not even a comparison.
I'm curious, there's been some talk of the culture of free, that information online can never be charged for, or at least that ship has sailed. I'm curious, just both of your reactions about that, and is that a trend that you think can be reversed or should be reversed?
I tend to take the view, as David said, that train has pretty much left the station. I mean, one of the odd things I find about the current discussion of charging for online content is that the reason that newspapers and most other publishers moved away from charging for online to begin with was not because of some ideological view that information wants to be free or something like that. I mean, it was a very straight set of math, which was that you lost so much readership by charging, and therefore lost so much advertising revenue by charging that you couldn't make that back from the subscription revenue. So just from a straight revenue standpoint, tomorrow if you flip the switch, your traffic declines by 80%, and therefore your ad revenue declines by 50%, and you can't make that up with the subscription. So that, and there's nothing that I've really seen that alters that basic dynamic. So I find some of the conversations around charging to be a little bit odd, in that respect. Now, having said that, I have seen a couple of ideas that I think are interesting. One is well, first of all, what I'll say, I don't think it'll work. The idea that you can mandate cable companies to charge subscriptions on your behalf, those kinds of things, I don't think any of that will work. I don't think any kind of government mandates will work. That's all wishful thinking. What I do think has some potential is there's the Financial Times has a what they call I think they call it a metered model, which basically says that you can come to the website, I don't know what their number is, but it's like 10 times a month. And if you come 10 times a month, it's free. And when you come for the 11th time, you have to pay. And that makes some sense to me, because that's a way of avoid, so you still get all the kind of drive-by traffic and incidental traffic, search-driven stuff, which accounts for a very large percentage of most website traffic. So you still get all that, but then you have a way of getting the people who are regulars and really committed to your site to pay something. So that, to me, there's some logic in that. I also think there's certainly a lot of logic in charging for premium content of different kinds. And what's commodity and what's special, is always going to be a discussion. But there are already, there are lots of websites out there that charge for content. So the issue is not whether you can get someone to pay for something online. The issue is what exactly will they pay for? And so, will they pay for, celebrity news? No. Will they pay for, investigative reporting about local issues? Maybe, but the mechanics are difficult, hard to say. Will they pay for financial content that will kind of help them make money tomorrow? Yes. Look at the Wall Street Journal, look at the Financial Times. So I think that there will be hybrid models where people are able to charge for some kinds of things. But I think the idea that somehow newspapers can sort of put up a paywall for their general, kind of run of newspaper content, and you'll have to pay to read the newspaper online as a general proposition, I don't think that's going to work.
And what do you think the New York Times Select says about that? I mean, the failure of that to really take off. I mean, do you think it speaks to the kind of content that needs to be walled off, or was it just, because it had been given away for free, walling it off then didn't make sense, and they just dropped traffic, and that's why they ended it? I'm just curious, what does that say about
Well, personally, I always thought the Time Select thing was a little bit funny in that they decided they charged for the columnists. And I would have gone the other way. I would have charged for the news and for the big projects and give the columnists away. I mean, because the columnists, with all due respect, Tom Friedman hasn't been right about a single foreign affairs issue in 15 years, so, why would I pay for that? So I don't know.
Don't bust on David Brooks. Don't you be busted on David.
Not to get going on that meme, but I thought it was a strange approach to charge for the opinion writers rather than for the news report. And because the news report, opinions are a dime a dozen, but the news report, they've got 1,000 people, putting out that news report, and that's really what has value, and they do a lot of exclusive stuff, and, it's a fantastic newspaper. So I'm not sure, Martin Eisenholtz, runs New York Times Digital, is a very smart guy I've known for a long time, and so I'm sure they had their reasons, but I don't know. I always thought that was somewhat of an odd experiment, personally.
Now, Kellen, the Flathead Beacon was started as a free newspaper, so obviously you're not going to. It'd be weird to charge. For
No, we have no plans to charge, and I just wanted to add one thing: is how not to charge, in my opinion. And I know when I worked at the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, they did this, and they may still do it. I know other newspapers do it. But it's the PDFs, it's the olives, it's the download where you get to view the newspaper as the newspaper and flip through it, and they have these graphics that flip through, and you pay $10 a month. I just think that your webmaster and web designer is probably better than presenting the news online than the folks designing your print paper. I don't think that's going to last long. Maybe it will. We do it, but we don't charge for it because it pleases our advertisers. They advertise in print, and then they can see those print pages online for free. But charging people for it, I've never really understood. So
Now, and of course, if anyone has any questions, we're not going to have a formal. Well, we will probably have a formal Q&A because I'll run out of things to ask. But feel free to raise your hand. We'll sort of throw to you as well. I mean, I have lots of questions, but if you do have questions, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, no one does right now. Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing to what Kellen said relating to design and charging for content. Is I do think there is another wave of stuff that's going to come relating to portable computing devices, mobile devices. And I know that all the big media companies are looking very hard at this right now, and there's sort of a vision that when Apple in particular comes out with its tablet computer, which is going to happen, probably within the next year or so, and as has often been the case with Apple, that device may well advance the state of the art by a couple of generations, and there's a concept where you could have a true multimedia publication where you could be kind of reading through, and then you kind of click on that picture and see the slideshow and click on that thing and have a narrated version, listen to the interview while you're reading the thing, and so there's some new things, and these things are going to be very design driven, but there is some, and they're also going to be niche products, certainly, at least for a while, but those kinds of things, I think it will be easier to charge for, partly because there's already a built-in payment mechanism through iTunes. I mean, if you envisioned kind of iTunes for newspapers, so I think that there are shoes left to drop here that are going to be part of this conversation, that haven't quite come around yet. So.
Could you just restate that? What did you just talk about? What is this application from Apple?
Well, I mean, there is a general belief that Apple is going to come out with a device that is a little bit, or in some ways, an advanced version of the Kindle, of the Amazon Kindle, a tablet computer, a very thin tablet-based computer, but that will provide the capability to present news in a true multimedia way that's not even entirely possible on a regular computer now, let alone in a piece of paper. So.
And I know there was a question. Or here, I could go all like Phil Donahue.
It's a broadcast.
One of the big issues on the connection side is net neutrality. If that somehow changes and there becomes a way for certain large providers to monitor whose traffic is going through, what does that do to your model? Does it have any effect at all or not?
That is a good question, and I've spent a little time looking at that issue. I think that there is potentially an issue there. I mean, the purpose of the net neutrality, or one of the purposes of that proceeding, is to assure that there isn't discrimination against people like New West or relatively small companies, because what's going to happen, I mean, and what this issue really is about is that Google can go to Bresnan, and they say, hey, we've got a deal for you. We're going to pay you to give Bresnan subscribers super fast access to all Google websites and slower access to Yahoo and Ask and whoever else they might use. So we, Google, will pay you, Bresnan, to do that. And from Bresnan's standpoint, that could be a good deal. It could be a lot of money. So the net neutrality thing is basically would make it illegal for Bresnan to do that. It would say that as an internet service provider, you have to treat everybody equally. You have to treat all bit streams equally. So I think that it is an important issue for a small publisher, that there be some kind of rules there. And I am concerned that we could be subject, to some of those forces. Now, having said that, from a public policy standpoint, I'm not sure it's realistic to require really 100% strict net neutrality, because, if I want to, broadcast pictures of my cat all day at 100 megabits a second, is Bresnan really required to give my video stream the same priority as it gives to, network news? I don't know. So you get into, to kind of legislate that you can't provide a better service to somebody who's willing to pay for it is tricky. So, but I'm glad you brought up the point. It's a very complicated issue. I know more about it than most, and I don't really know my way around it. But it is a good thing to pay attention to, I think, because it could have big implications for the media business.
And I would just chime in, even though I'm the moderator, that as a broadcaster, I can tell you it's something that PBS and the NewsHour are well aware of, because what it could do is dissuade from embracing video on demand quite as aggressively as you might, but also figuring out how you structure content in such a way that it doesn't get hurt by whatever net neutrality laws exist, or penalized because it's coming in at too fast a bandwidth it gets very technical and very hazy very fast, but it's something that I know as broadcasters are particularly worried about, because that's their core product. And if they can't move their core product the way they want, if we're spending millions of dollars to do high definition broadcasting and then we're cramming it into this, still pretty sketchy, low bandwidth video experience online, how do you sort of foster new viewers when you're not putting out the product that you want to be putting out on air? And so it's something that they've been tracking really closely, even since I left. But I'm curious. I mean, this is we know that the media is in crisis generally, but let's talk about Montana specifically. When it comes to we've been doing a project with the Christian Science Monitor and the NewsHour and the University of Montana are working together on a project. And one of the things we do is we look at data around the country, and we did an assessment of broadband penetration in different counties around the country, and then looked at the state of the media in those counties. And you would suspect that there might be some vague connection that the more broadband video or more broadband internet connection there was in different places, the more the traditional media organizations in those places might see their sort of business models jeopardized. And we actually found that. We found that actually places where there are sort of ubiquitous high-speed internet, places those places were sort of correlated to actually seeing more newspapers closing and more sort of financial troubles with the media organizations in those towns. Do you think there's any real reality to that? I mean, is that something that we've seen here where certain parts of the state or certain communities that you might serve have better usage, and that sort of correlates to some of the problems we've seen in other newspapers? Or do you think it sort of might not be a one-for-one kind of connection? And this is really for either of you.
Well, as far as the Flathead goes, and Liz can correct me, she knows more of these numbers. There's good broadband penetration up there, and we're pretty local. You know, I mean, we're not. Our model is, you know, aside from maybe some business and political coverage, our model is not regional or statewide. So we're blessed there. You know, Whitefish, Kalispell, all those towns have broadband. However, on the outskirts, there's certainly DSL, and it's slow. And we, at the beginning, we definitely had a few complaints, and but it's fewer and fewer, and it's probably like 15-20%.
Do you change your product based on those complaints?
We don't. We definitely aim to broadband. I mean, if some of our pages, I'm certain, even though I haven't logged on a DSL for years, but I'm certain that they're loading slowly, and I hope that, you know, some of the things that earlier panelists had talked about, some of the broadband spreading to rural areas. I think it's really needed, and you know, I hope it continues, and I hope it happens.
On the question of broadband impacting the business models of local papers, I would say, well, yeah. I mean, if broadband basically means more competition, and more competition is not good for the incumbents. So, you know, certainly when you have monopoly media environments, you know, change is bad, and so, you know, that is what it is. I don't know that, I think the research may be accurate. Whether that means that there's a crisis or not is kind of a different question. I thought it was interesting in the panel this morning, the woman from the Fort Peck paper, I don't know if she's still here, but she talked about how she started this paper and they charged $1 a copy, and they print it every day, and they charge $1 a copy, and they sell it out, and they put up the website, and now more people can read the paper. I wanted to ask her this question, but it appeared that having the newspaper available on the website didn't influence people's willingness to pay $1 a copy for it. So I thought that was an interesting counterpoint. If you've got a strong product that people really want, then the added competition from broadband internet, for example, is not going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't your demographic also take into account of that, you know, if you're looking at people that have access to the internet versus people who are not even having computers in their homes?
Yeah, the question was about, I guess I'll do this for the TV. The question was about, you know, are the demographics skewed based on, I don't want to misstate what you were saying, maybe are the demographics skewed because you're only assessing people who have internet connection and doesn't even address the potential digital divide issues?
Yeah, well, I think most people, I mean, between home and work, you know, it's 70-80% online. So
I'm a webmaster for DNRC, and I see this option all the time. We struggle with people that are farmers who don't necessarily get on their computers every day to get that information, to get the forms they're trying to get to them. So we still have to produce our copy so that it's in a physical form for them versus them being able to come get it online.
I'll give it 5 years. That'll be over.
And for us, since we're printing online, we definitely have two separate audiences. There are some people that never pick up a print product and go to flatheadbeacon.com every day, and then there are people that have never been to the website, and some people don't even, we push it so hard in the print and everywhere, still don't know we have a website. And they pick up the print edition, they're fine with that at Super One. They pick it up every week and they don't want to go online. So they still exist.
No, and we found, we've been doing a lot of audience research, and then I'll go back. Again, I'm acting like a panelist. But the NewsHour found that 80% of our audience 80% of our broadcast audience didn't know we had a website, and 75% of our website audience thought we were just some kind of media companies. Like, they'd be like, I really like that article that Jim Lehrer wrote. And we'd be like, what are you talking about? That's a transcript of a piece that had Jim Lehrer as like the moderator of it, and they didn't recognize the difference. But I'm sorry, there was a question in the back.
But your question about does broadband somehow imply a negative thing for local newspapers, the absence of broadband has an incredibly negative economic impact in the community, period. And frankly, the access to broadband, in my opinion, gives people a much greater opportunity to make money, if you will, online or, in a sort of business model that therefore grows the local audience over time.
So yeah, the point in the back for the at-home viewer was that that access to broadband is an economic driver unto itself, and that lack of that could affect whatever kind of business development might occur in a locality. Is that sort of what? Yes, it does. Sorry, I won't make it. I'm trying to be balanced and fair. So we've talked about sort of the emergence of your multimedia products, because I mean they are sort of, I mean there's the printed edition, there's the website edition, there are the multiple things that New West are up to. I'm curious, based on what you're seeing evolve and how other media are trying to evolve themselves, do you have any, up to the point that you're willing to share, plans to evolve your products in the future, or things that you think are potential growth areas to find new audiences that you haven't tapped yet that you think are waiting out there?
Well, on my end, on the Beacon's end, I think it's my job as well as put out the print edition every week, which is a chore in itself, and the print product is our biggest expense. I mean, printing print newspapers is not cheap. So I do think it is my job to position the Beacon to go online only. But it's funny, I more often get asked if we're going to go twice a week from people in the community. No kidding. Like, you guys ever think of going twice a week? And I tell them they're crazy. But that'd be so hard. We have 5 people. That's where I think I need to position the Beacon. Do I think that's going to happen right away? No. I think it would. I think more it would go maybe a monthly glossy. We'd really just push enterprise pieces and long form journalism in a monthly, and really just do the city council coverage, that sort of thing, online daily, and then maybe even to quarterly, and then maybe online. That's a ways away. But I think that's the next step. The other thing is, for us, the only thing we really cover outside our region, which is kind of a universal language of politics and business. Those are 2 areas that we focus heavily on, and we feel we can reach a broader audience. We cover a lot of the timber industry and cover a lot of politics. A lot of that is because we love to. We love politics, and so we'll probably keep going and trying to broaden our audience in those 2 areas, maybe business and politics, and then hopefully I can convince all those print readers that the online's just as good as well as the advertisers, but it hasn't happened yet.
Let me have Jonathan answer, and then I'll come out to the audience.
Yeah, just to answer quickly, one opportunity that we see is actually in content syndication and content sales that we haven't seized that well, and that's actually a consequence partly of the downsizing of the industry, that in some ways there is more demand for quality content. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with the traditional ways with the Associated Press and within the newspaper industry, the dissatisfaction with the business model there. And so we think, and based on a number of conversations I've had, there's a lot of interest in kind of just in great stories. And you know, great stories will always have value. Great stories are not a commodity, and they have value. And so we have always found that nothing drives more traffic than a great story, and so that's how ultimately we monetize what we do.
What about a slideshow of fashion photos? That apparently drives some traffic too.
Yeah, not quite our niche.
Dennis?
Yes, one of the things it seems to me today is a lot of small news organizations in Montana trying to do great things. And there was some discussion earlier in the broadcast panel about opportunities for collaboration. This is a question for the panelists too, but it may be a question for some of the media managers out there today. Are there opportunities, and what are the obstacles to pair up with a broadcast station or maybe another news organization to do this enterprise project that you guys want to do?
Well, if I could give a blunt answer to that, I mean, the obstacle for New West is that most of the traditional media companies in Montana view us as, the devil, that's been sent to kill them, and so they don't want to work with us. So, that's the short answer. But we're certainly open.
Well, the devil would be, wouldn't he?
Just real quick, I think, I don't think we're viewed as the devil as much as you, but but no, really. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I love to meet with journalists when they're going through the Flathead and they've never been to the Beacon office. I love to meet and collaborate, that sort of thing. And an example is, They don't. Not all of them are traditional media. This young man I met with yesterday, he started this No Name Outdoors, and it's this social networking site for bagging big game, and it's a place to show off your elk, basically, your dead elk, and it's a nice site. So the Missoulian wrote a nice story on it. We wrote a piece on it, and then I called him and I just said, "Hey, you want to come in and meet?" And he's into it. He wants to, because I don't have the resources to cover this. I have one guy who covers business, sports, and whitefish, and I can't add outdoors. So, and he's very interested in that sort of thing. And you can form these partnerships that, cross promotion, that sort of thing. And some of them do work, but I'm the same way. It's where I'm open. I listen to everybody. So.
I mean, I think, and then I'll go out.
And I'll say too, I was being a little bit glib there, but we have had, we actually have had a number of very good partnerships especially with the university and also with media organizations outside of Montana, and that is a big part of our model. So.
And I'll just chime in one more thing, because before I fled DC, one of my charges was collaboration with National Public Radio, with local public broadcasting. We worked with Montana PBS, and I cannot speak highly enough about it, but I also cannot tell you that you need to assume it's going to take you about twice as long the first time. And that's what people hate. Like they're ready to go, they come in, we'll just do it together. But I mean, just simply learning the vocabulary of collaboration takes at least a project or two. And once that happens, it's an incredibly rewarding way to do it, because we've done these projects or it's not we. I keep saying that. I keep like I'm still at the NewsHour. The NewsHour has done these projects with NPR that have created phenomenal content that we couldn't have created on our own. But it took months to get it all working. And I would say invest the time and then get the payback, but you have to invest time in it too. But I'm sorry, you're back in the back. Julie, I think.
What is the role or the function of age in this discussion? Are the people who read, for example, the print version, Kellen, my age, and the people who are online, Haley's age? Is this a major issue, or is it a non-issue? Do you know that much about your readers? And does that then drive the decisions that you all are going to make in the future?
Our readers' average it's skewed I think it's skewed male just a little bit, and it's 40s. It's like median age is maybe mid 40s, and I don't really know if that's. I think that's about average. There is. I would assume that more young people are reading online than old people. But I also. What's funny is I also think most of my commenters are. I think they're older. It's really weird because I mean I follow them and I have to block them, and you know we have this great discussion. You guys probably know KGEZ just got shut down the Flathead, and we had 250 comments, and you can imagine how horrible they are. And when I block them, they call me, and they're really upset, and they'll call me on the phone because I'll email them and say you can't comment, but you can call me and we can talk about it. And they'll call me. And I don't think, I've probably had a half dozen phone calls, and all of them skew older. And it's like, I don't know who they are, yeah. So I think, I think those maybe not walls, but I think it's becoming a lot more, it's kind of a stereotype to say it's just a younger demographic going online to read the news anymore. So that's just my opinion.
You know, we did some extensive surveying on our, we know a lot more about our online readers than we do our print readers actually. So the age is about 44, it's an upper middle class, and it's a higher demographic. And more than half our online readers are outside of Montana, which is very interesting. Our police blotter is hugely popular in New York.
But we've heard a little about citizen journalism. I think David suggested that mainstream newspapers could recruit citizen journalists to do some of the legwork at committee meetings and so on and so forth. You guys are mission-driven online, and yet I don't think you're heavily engaged with citizen journalists, and I'm wondering what's the problem there.
Oh. It's very difficult to get a citizen journalist to meet deadlines and to write quality stories. I mean, it really is, and it will continue to be. I have tried hard to get anyone, you want to cover a game, whatever, you have a 17-year-old kid in journalism class, he's not going to go to the game, and he's not going to meet deadline, and he's not going to turn in good copy, and there are success stories. I mean, that doesn't mean I don't have freelancers, but I have freelancers who have journalism backgrounds, and I still encourage, citizen journalism. People want to talk to me and write stories, that sort of thing. I always listen, I always look at their clips. Just like anyone else, any other editor, but it's a lot harder just to go out there and find, especially, and it depends where you are. I mean, the Flathead Valley is not San Francisco. I mean, you these big cities with this huge population of educated people. Flathead Valley is very educated. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is you don't have as many people to choose from. I mean, it's the truth, and so it's hard to find citizen journalists, in my opinion. I think you've had more success than me, but it's difficult. There certainly is still a need for the trained journalists. Thank God.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, our experience has been very similar. The number of people in Missoula, Montana, that want to spend 3 hours at the city council meeting, at that boring city council meeting, and write it up in a way that is something other than horribly boring, and do it in a timely manner on a regular basis. Introduce me to that person because I haven't found him yet. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of, the whole idea of citizen journalism, I've always actually been a little bit skeptical about, and I think it's fading a little bit as a meme, because the truth is that if you want decent stuff, you've got to pay for it, even a little bit. And so we've moved much more to a model. We have what we call community blogs, which are contributed pieces by people who are not professional journalists and are much closer to really being citizen journalists. Not in all cases, but in most cases, they're paid at least a little bit. And we think that is something that has a lot more potential. You get what you pay for in journalism, like everything else.
Now, one of the themes that, and I'll shut up in a moment. One of the themes that we repeatedly have heard in this conference, and of course, I mean, it goes back to Senator Wheeler, is this idea that the informed citizenry. And there's a lot of concern, rightly so, about the evolution of the media and will it continue to produce an informed citizenry. I'm curious, there seems to be a natural sort of tension when we're talking about new media or digital media because it's so up to the user whether to engage with it or not. And I would honestly believe that actually that's true for any form of media, but there is definitely, you know, in what David was talking about at lunch, you know, we'll put it all up for free, but it's really a premium print product. I'm curious, just when you think about, can the web create informed citizenry, or can it create only informed pockets of citizenry? Like, how does that sort of empowering the user that much to choose what information to consume versus creating an informed citizen?
I think one thing that we do as journalists is we take ourselves a little too seriously, and online is a place where, you know, you don't have to separate your hard news from, you know, entertainment. And by entertainment, I don't mean a slideshow of celebrities, but, you know, we do. You know, Liz was right. Our police blotter gets read by Dave Barry every other day. He links to us. It's funny, it's fun. Our blogs, we have a fashion blog from a young woman, and people come to that, and the site's colorful and it's vibrant and it's changing. At the same time, if you want to go read the police blotter, right in your face is going to be a 3-part series on homelessness in the Flathead. And they may only have to read the headline, but at least they're reading that. At least they're reading that, and I've never thought that they've had to be separate. And I think that's just one way. That's how we do it. That's what I think when I really am mixing, even meeting with this No Name Outdoors and maybe finding a way to throw up, big game on our site. I don't hunt, but a lot of people do, and maybe they're just going there for that hunting, and maybe they're just going there to brag about, a fish they caught. But as long as we also are promoting and good journalism, and it's relevant and it's very visible as well, a lot of those folks that maybe would just go see that hunting thing are reading about real problems in the Flathead, and hopefully that's one way to do it. I know it's not the only one.
Did you want to ask a question?
Actually, this is just a brief response to the notion of collaboration. We have this small cable TV station in the capital city, and then we telecast across to 50 communities in the state via cable. Basically, it's government television. But we have a very interesting and strange relationship with the local paper. It's a lead paper. They are assigning resources to their website with video. They'll go and do video of sports and things like that. We have always been interested and made it publicly known that we're interested in collaborating with the newspaper on just about anything. But the reporters are really great. The business people would rather we didn't exist. They pretend we're not there. They're not interested in anything that's going to keep eyes off of their new prize. On a grander scale, we envision, because we're not driven by, we have to earn money. We have to work hard to earn money. But we're not a business organization. So we're looking into the possibility of having radio on television statewide. In other words, people get to see a radio show as it's produced, the radio personalities that exist. And this is not a novel idea. We know it's done nationally, but it hasn't been done in Montana. At the same time, I can envision a program, maybe a quarterly program, about the newspaper industry. All of these things that you guys do and need to be concerned about, we'd love to have a program about that on a regular basis. We do have celebrity reporters and thinkers on our stage from time to time, and that's great, but it would be great to have a program with newspaper editors and publishers and make that a statewide deal. The end result would be, I would think, more people will be interested in the Flathead Beacon outside the Flathead. More people will go to New West, more people would flock to public radio that are already there.
but we're using TV as a medium to spread messages about the other media. We'd like to do that.
Peggy?
It's just real interesting to hear, and it breaks my heart whenever it's like, well, they approached the newspaper and they didn't want to collaborate. There was some research that was done in the late 90s on newspaper culture, in newsrooms and in business sides and the top management. And they were looking at how resistant or open to change were newspapers. And it was a statistically significant sample across the country. And the guy who did it has sampled industries and companies all around the world. And he found that the newspaper industry was the most defensive culture workplace, meaning resistant to change, of any he had run across. He compared them mostly with military and healthcare, and then said they scored a lot better because at least they had a range. And the newspaper people who answered it, there was hardly anyone open to change, according to his measure. Now that was in the late 1990s, and a lot of people are saying there's nothing like crisis that drives openness to change. But you see that in little ways, and I can just tell you one quick example from the journalism school this last spring with the W.R. Grace trial, which was here in Missoula, where we had journalism students in a class on environmental reporting and law students in a class cover the trial by live blogging and twittering. And to this day, we have gotten more interest in the legal community across the nation than in traditional journalism communities. So I think there's still some of that resistance to change in the news media. And I have a friend who I keep calling saying, Mary, is it a big enough crisis yet? Because she led that change research. But I think it's something that we all need to think about, because collaboration sounds warm and fuzzy and easy and doable, and I love what Lee said. It's very, very hard to do, and you're seeing it. And you're seeing people who are competitors realizing that it's not a zero-sum game, that there's something in it for everyone. And it'll be interesting to see whether even this conversation leads to a little more collaboration among partners we would never have thought of before. We're open to it with you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one thing to that, and because we are members of the AP at the Beacon, it kind of makes us unique as a weekly. But and I worked for the AP. This was my first job out of college, and you know, I remember, but I still remember the days at least one day I worked at where the AP would write a story, and then essentially the Daily would write the same story. They're not adding anything, just to get their byline on it. I never understood it. I don't see it nearly as much anymore. And you know, Jim Strauss was talking a little bit. He's like, you know, we do the enterprise pieces with John Adams, who I think does a great job, and then relies on the AP to do it. And I also agree with Mike. I think it's saturated, the coverage. You have so many different stories on the same meeting. And I covered the North Dakota legislature, which is crazier than Montana's, and it was the same thing. And I never get that. And it is an example of just defensiveness. And why not run the AP story if it's a 200-word piece on a meeting? I never got that, but I just wanted to add that.
I don't think it happened.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know if anyone has suggestions on how to reach people that, in rural Montana, West Superior in particular, Alberton, Superior, there are people who will not get their news from the internet. The TVs won't cover anything out there unless it's a body being dumped off a triple pictures into the Alberton border. And we could not support a newspaper there as a print edition. They are asking us time and again, when are you going to start printing? When are you going to start printing? Well, we're online. We update it every day. But they will not or cannot go online to get that. A lot of them don't have the money to pay for a broadband connection in particular, or a dial-up connection at the very least. So do we wait for them to die so that the young people grow up and then they will begin getting our media? There's a 20-year gap here. But they're the people I'm supposed to write to and protect. What steps do I take to reach them in this period of transition here?
Mm-hmm. Well, John?
There's no radio either, for all practical purposes.
What's their
Well, you're making it hard.
Well, is the problem they don't have the money, or they just don't want to go online?
Yeah, is it a lack of trust, or is it?
They're uncomfortable getting their news from that kind of a source. They want something they can have in their hands, in particular. A lot of the older people.
Was that there previously?
Yeah, there have been several newspapers in Alberton, published in Alberton over the last 10 years.
Okay.
I've worked for 3 of them,
Okay.
2 of them. That we were losing $20,000 or $30,000 a year. And you cannot run a newspaper like, and for Christ's sakes, the journalists weren't getting paid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer to that,
That's a good one.
It's not, the news business is not going to be able to provide everything that everybody wants in every format that they want it. I mean, if it doesn't add up to produce a print paper, then I don't know how you address that, really. I mean,
I figured out. They need to know when the doctors are going to be in town, when the meetings of the school board are, what happened at the school board, who's running for office at the school board, or what the fire board says at their meetings. When there's conflict at the Frenchtown Fire Board, the mass media here in Missoula is right out there to cover it. But let that kind of go up into a haze of smoke and they're gone. They never mention it again unless something's about to explode up there.
yeah, well, I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, the economics of print publishing are, it's expensive to print stuff, and if people won't support, if there isn't the business base to support it, then people are going to have to go online. I mean, I don't know how else to think about it, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some kind of education campaign or something that could be mounted by the local community, but I mean, financially, you just can't. I mean, unless it's like a twice monthly, but then you.
Significant population in this state that are in exactly that position. It's much more so in the eastern part of the state. But I look at the group that we're talking to today, and all day, it's almost all western Montana. Where's the representation here of the folks in the eastern Montana that are having a real problem in terms of access? It's just simply not available. And yet that is a significant population in this state.
Go.
Can I tell one little anecdote?
Yeah.
That I think is relevant to this, and this is just on a very different topic, but this has been touched upon in many ways, and I thought it would be worth telling this little story because I thought it was interesting, and Peggy reminded me of it in mentioning the Grace trial. So as you may know, if you read New West, I spent a lot of time covering the Yellowstone Club bankruptcy, which is a very interesting story on many levels. And during that bankruptcy, there was a trial, what's called an adversary proceeding, which is basically a civil trial within a bankruptcy proceeding. And so for this trial, I decided to Twitter the trial, to do coverage via Twitter. And I was not at all sure what that would be like. I was kind of nervous about it because I thought it would be distracting and time consuming while I was trying to take notes and do my regular thing. And but there was wireless. It was here in Missoula, and there was wireless in the courtroom, and so we could do it. And so I started doing it. And Twitter, as most of you probably know, is very short updates, 150 characters something. And so I thought that it was going to be burdensome, and I thought I would just be kind of more transcribing what I was doing. But as I got into it, as I started doing it, it turned out to be very interesting because what I was doing was not really transcribing what was happening in the courtroom. It was actually commentary. It was really commentary about what was happening and what was significant, and it was kind of a real-time update about not what they were saying, but what was really happening and what was the significance of the judge saying this or that, or this witness saying this or that. And so it was great. So I was doing it. It was really fun, and it was not, it didn't get in my way, and I was really enjoying it, and it quickly attracted a huge following. We had like 500 people sign up for the Twitter feed, like in one day, to follow that. And the judge ended up shutting it down, because he didn't understand what it was, and I thought I had gotten away with it because the Grace trial was doing it. So this was this was going to be my line if he challenged me, was that, well, they're doing it upstairs at the Grace trial. And so when he called me into chambers at a break on the first day, and he said, what the hell are you doing, you know, and what is this Twitter thing? And I explained it to him and showed it to him, and because he was worried that it was transcription, which is illegal in federal court. And so then he was okay with it, and he said, well, if they're doing it upstairs, if it's okay upstairs, it's okay with me. So that was what I was hoping for. But then the next day, one of the defense attorneys objected to it because he doesn't like my reporting, frankly. That's why he objected. But so the judge ended up banning it. But the reason I mentioned it is because I thought it was very interesting on several levels. One is that it was a different kind of reporting, but that was very fun and interesting to do, and was really more about the commentary than about the reporting. But it was very much real time, and the people who were into that Twitter feed were like really into it. You know, people told me they were like glued to that thing. The reason the judge ultimately didn't like it, I think, was because everybody in the courtroom was reading it, and that created an odd dynamic because it was like Weber's real-time commentary, you know, being read by all the lawyers, and you know, and critiquing, you know, the judge or whatever. So that was kind of interesting and raised novel issues. But the other thing, to bring it back to the themes of this discussion, is that ultimately that is also the kind of thing that somehow I think we should be able to charge for, because you know, the 500 people who really cared about that Twitter feed, they would have happily paid, you know, $5 a day, I don't know, you know, some significant amount of money to get at that. Now, how you make that happen, I have no idea. But anyway, I just thought it was a good anecdote about kind of changes in media and reporting and what some of that means. He didn't really have a basis. I mean, he banned it. You know, a federal court judge has tremendous autonomy to regulate their courtroom in the way that they want. And what he said was the nominal reason was that because witnesses, you know, future witnesses are not allowed to follow the preceding witnesses. So he was afraid of witness contamination, that people were going to read the Twitter feed. But you know, that was kind of bogus, because that applies also to newspapers. You know, the witnesses are instructed, you know, don't read the newspaper because you're not allowed to read about what the prior witnesses said. So I never understood why Twitter was any different than that. And then we ended up having a further discussion about it, because I was like, look, Judge, you know, I don't know what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. Like, can I post brief updates to New West as long as it's not on Twitter? Or can I not Twitter during lunch? Or at what time am I allowed to start tweeting? You know, like the rules were very vague, and you know, we kind of agreed on something. But you know, I mean, Kirscher is a good guy, and he was earnest about it. You know, I think he just felt ultimately that he was in very unfamiliar territory. He didn't understand it, and people were objecting to it. The lawyers on one side were objecting to it. He felt like he didn't understand it, and so to be on the safe side, he was just going to ban it. And he clearly had the authority to do that. I mean, just on the grounds that, and again, in federal court, you know, there's no cameras, no tape recorders, so that's how that came about.
Well, I think it's an example of how new media is going to be continuing to change, not only the media system, but also the legal system. So maybe that's a good point to lead it at. I want to thank Jonathan and Kellen. Thank you.